The sulphurous haze of Proxima Phi's orbital scrapyard hung like a gossamer curtain against the brilliant white of the distant star. Hundreds of derelict vessels, ranging from personal shuttles to once mighty cruisers, drifted in a choreographed dance of neglect. This was where ships came to die, and where shipwrights of all species came to salvage whatever treasures remained in their metal carcasses. Among the Rielian engineers with their 4 arms and bioluminescent work lights, a single human figure stood out. Max Holloway adjusted his ancient, oil-stained jumpsuit and squinted at the massive hull looming before him. His weathered face, creased by years of squinting into engine compartments across 3 star systems, betrayed nothing of his thoughts as he assessed the derelict vessel. "Vanguard's folly," he muttered, running his gloved hand along the ship's scarred exterior. The name had been nearly sanded away by cosmic dust and radiation. But Max had done his homework. This particular model of Vanguard-class transport wasn't common, even when it was in production 50 years ago. Most had been decommissioned after the Treaty of Betelgeuse, rendered obsolete by more efficient Rielian designs. A notification flashed across his retinal display. 6 hours until delivery deadline. 6 hours to extract something valuable from this hulk, or face another month of nutrient paste and recycled water in his cramped quarters on Proxima Station. He'd promised the scrapyard manager something good in exchange for exclusive salvage rights. The magnetized soles of his boots clicked against the hull as he climbed toward what appeared to be an access panel. Behind him, the vast emptiness of space yawned, punctuated only by the distant shipyard beacon and the occasional flash of a maintenance drone. The silence was absolute, save for his own breathing inside his helmet and the soft crackle of his life support system. "Holloway! You again?" The voice in his comm made him wince. Zenith, the yard supervisor. "Thought you'd learned your lesson after that Meridian wreck. Nothing but scrap metal and empty promises." Max didn't bother looking back toward the observation platform, where he knew the Rielian would be standing, probably with arms crossed in all 4 of their appendage crossing glory. "I've got a good feeling about this one," Max replied, prying at the panel with his multi-tool. "Just need a few hours." "A few hours!" Zenith's laugh was like metal scraping metal. "And what makes you think you'll find anything the Rielian salvage teams missed? They've been over this section 3 times already." "Maybe they weren't looking with the right eyes," Max murmured, but didn't transmit the comment. Instead, he just grunted an acknowledgement and continued working. The panel finally gave way with a reluctant groan, revealing a mass of circuits and conduits that would have appeared hopelessly tangled to an untrained eye. But Max saw patterns where others saw chaos. 15 years working salvage operations across the frontier had taught him to read a ship's guts like other people read books. He'd barely begun his inspection when shadows fell across him. 3 Rielian engineers had jetted over from a nearby wreck, their environmental suits gleaming with corporate logos and certification badges. Unlike Max's patched and faded equipment, theirs was top of the line, complete with integrated quantum diagnostics and augmented reality overlays. "Look at this," said the tallest of them, a female Rielian whose name badge identified her as Alara Cathar. Her voice carried the melodic overtones typical of her species, but the condescension needed no translation. A human, using manual tools. How quaint. The other 2 Rielians emitted the warbling sound that passed for laughter among their kind. One of them, a stocky male with unusual ochre markings on his environmental suit, floated closer, peering at Max's work with all 4 of his eyes. "You're wasting your time," he said. That particular model had a catastrophic design flaw in the power distribution system. Nothing salvageable within 50 meters of that access point. Max continued working, focusing on a cluster of connectors that seemed oddly pristine compared to the surrounding components. "Appreciate the insight," he muttered, "but I think I'll form my own conclusions." "Typical human stubbornness," Alara said to her companions, loud enough for Max to hear. They never did learn their place in the technical hierarchy. All hammers and bolts, no finesse. The three Rielians jetted away, their laughter lingering in Max's calm longer than it should have. He switched to his private channel, silencing the outside world. Peace at last. Something was off about this ship, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. The external markings identified it as a standard Vanguard transport, mothballed after decades of service hauling cargo between the outer colonies. But these power couplings, they were military grade, with quantum shielding that would have been unnecessary for commercial transport. And then he spotted it, a tiny insignia etched into the metal beneath a cluster of burnt-out circuitry. Not the standard Vanguard cross logo, but something far more interesting. The double helix emblem of the War Coalition's Special Projects Division. Max's pulse quickened. This wasn't just any derelict. It was military hardware disguised as a civilian transport. And if he was right, what lay beneath the ship's unassuming exterior could be worth a fortune, or get him killed. His retinal display flashed another warning. 5 hours remaining. With renewed focus, Max began carefully extracting the damaged components, working his way deeper into the ship's systems. Whatever secrets this vessel held, he intended to uncover them before his deadline expired. What he didn't notice was the small reconnaissance drone that had detached itself from the Rielian engineer's equipment, now hovering silently 20 meters away, its cameras fixed firmly on his every move. Max worked methodically, stripping away the outer layer of circuitry to reveal what lay beneath. His suspicions were confirmed with each component he uncovered. The power distribution network wasn't failing due to a design flaw. It had been deliberately sabotaged to make the ship appear worthless to casual salvagers. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide this vessel in plain sight. 3 hours in, he hit the jackpot, behind a false bulkhead, hidden beneath layers of ablative armor that shouldn't have been there. Max discovered an intact stealth system, not the commercial-grade sensor bafflers used by smugglers, but military-spec cloaking technology that was supposed to exist only in classified reports and conspiracy theories. "Holy hell," he whispered, his breath fogging his visor momentarily. His calm crackled back to life. "Made any fascinating discoveries yet?" "Human," Alara's voice dripped with sarcasm. Max quickly sealed the compartment he'd been working on. "Just the usual," he lied. "Trying to salvage some drive components that might fetch a decent price." "Of course you are," she replied. "We're finishing up here and heading back to the station. Try not to blow yourself up with those primitive tools of yours." "Wouldn't dream of it," Max said, forcing a light tone. "Enjoy your evening." As the Rielians departed, Max returned to his work with renewed urgency. The stealth system alone would set him up for years, but he suspected there was more, much more, hidden within the Vanguard's folly, and he had just under 3 hours to extract as much as he could before the deadline. The ship seemed to resist his efforts, as if aware of his intentions. Access panels that should have opened smoothly required extra force. System diagnostics ran sluggishly on his portable scanner. Even the ship's ambient temperature felt unusually cold, seeping through his insulated gloves and making his fingers stiff. "Come on, you stubborn beast," Max muttered, wrestling with a particularly resilient maintenance hatch. "What else are you hiding?" The hatch finally gave way, revealing a compartment that definitely wasn't on any standard Vanguard schematic. Inside, nestled among shock-absorbing brackets, sat a cluster of sleek, cylindrical objects. Recognition dawned slowly, then hit Max like a gut punch. Self-guided missiles, not the defensive countermeasures that might be justified on a transport crossing contested space, but offensive weapons with enough firepower to take down a small cruiser. The kind of weaponry that violated at least 3 interstellar treaties. Max's mind raced. The stealth system, the hidden weapons. This wasn't just a disguised military vessel. It was a ghost ship, a deniable asset designed for covert operations where the War Coalition needed maximum deniability. His comm pinged, startling him. It was Zenith, the yard supervisor. "Holloway, your client's representative is here. Says they want an update on your progress. What should I tell them?" Max froze. Client? He hadn't told anyone about this salvage job except Zenith, and he certainly hadn't mentioned any client. "Must be a mistake," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm working independently." A new voice broke into the channel, smooth, authoritative, distinctly human. "No mistake, Mr. Holloway. My employer is very interested in what you've discovered aboard the Vanguard's Folly." Cold dread settled in Max's stomach. "And who might your employer be?" "Someone who values discretion. Someone who would reward handsomely for the safe return of certain proprietary technologies. And someone who would be most displeased if those technologies were to fall into the wrong hands." A threat, thinly veiled. Max glanced at his retinal display. 2 hours and 27 minutes remaining. "I'm just a salvager," he said carefully. "Looking for components to sell. Nothing proprietary about drive couplings and power cells. We both know that's not all you found." The voice remained pleasant, but with an edge like a knife wrapped in silk. "My employer is prepared to offer 50,000 credits for the stealth system. A generous sum for a few hours' work. Wouldn't you say?" So they knew about the stealth system. The surveillance drone. It had to be. The Raelians must have been working for whoever this was. "I'll need to think about it," Max stalled, mind racing through options. "Don't think too long. The offer expires when your salvage rights do. 2 hours and 25 minutes, by my count." The comm went silent. Max leaned against the bulkhead, heart pounding. 50,000 credits was more than he'd make in 2 years of salvage work. But if this ship was what he suspected, the technology aboard could be worth 10 times that amount to the right buyer. Or it could get him killed. People who built ships like this didn't appreciate others poking around in their business. Max made his decision. He would extract what he could, document everything, and then decide what to do with his findings. Knowledge was leverage, and right now, he needed all the leverage he could get. Working with renewed purpose, Max began carefully dismantling the stealth system, taking holovids of each component and connection before removing it. Whatever happened next, he wanted proof of what he'd found. He was so absorbed in his work that he almost missed the subtle vibration running through the hull. Not the normal creaks and groans of a derelict vessel, but a rhythmic pulsing, as if something deep within the ship had awakened. Max froze, sensing the change. In the silence of space, intuition was often the only warning you got before disaster struck. And right now, every instinct he had was screaming danger. Slowly, he sealed his toolkit and began moving toward the access hatch he'd entered through. Whatever was happening, he didn't want to be inside when the ship lurched violently, throwing Max against a bulkhead. His helmet slammed into metal, and for a moment, stars burst across his vision. By the time his sight cleared, emergency lights had activated throughout the compartment, bathing everything in a pulsing red glow. "What the hell?" he gasped, clinging to a handhold as the ship continued to tremble. His comm erupted with chatter. Zenith, the mysterious client's representative, and a dozen other voices all talking over each other. "Automatic defense systems. Power surge detected. Evacuate immediately." Through his visor, Max could see other salvagers abandoning nearby wrecks, their jetpacks leaving trails of ionized gas as they fled toward the safety of the station. The Vanguard's Folly had gone from derelict to deadly in seconds. He needed to leave, now. Max pulled himself toward the hatch, fighting against the ship's increasingly violent movements. 3 meters away. 2. 1. The hatch slammed shut just as his fingers reached for it. "No, no, no," he muttered, yanking at the manual release. It wouldn't budge. The ship had sealed itself, trapping him inside. His comm crackled again. This time, only one voice came through. Alara, the Realian engineer who had mocked him earlier.
Holloway, can you hear me?
"I'm here," he responded, surprised at how calm he sounded. "Sealed inside. Ship's defense systems have activated. We know. The whole yard knows. Whatever you did in there triggered an automated security protocol. The ship thinks it's under attack." Max bit back a retort. He hadn't triggered anything intentionally, but arguing wouldn't get him out any faster. "Can you override it from outside?" "Negative. It's running on an isolated power source. But I might be able to talk you through a manual override from inside." She paused. "If you're not too proud to accept help from a Realian. That is, under different circumstances." Max might have laughed at the irony. "Right now, I'd accept help from a Zorbian slime mold if it got me out of here. What do I need to do?" As Alara began explaining the override procedure, Max couldn't help but wonder why she was suddenly so helpful. The same engineer who had dismissed his abilities hours ago was now offering to save his life. Something didn't add up. But with the ship's systems continuing to activate around him, weapons charging, engines attempting to restart despite decades of neglect, Max had more immediate concerns than Alara's motives. "You need to reach the main command node," she was saying. "It should be 2 decks up from your position, in what would have been the navigation center." "Should be." The Vanguard class had several variants. Without knowing which specific model this is. "It's not a standard Vanguard," Max interrupted, making his way through the trembling vessel toward what he hoped was an internal access ladder. "It's a WCSPD prototype, disguised as a civilian transport." Silence filled the comm for several seconds. "Are you certain?" Alara finally asked, her voice tense. "Found the markings myself. Along with stealth systems and enough firepower to start a small war." Max reached the ladder and began climbing. "Which probably explains why it's so unhappy about me poking around inside it." "Max, listen to me very carefully." Alara's voice had lost all trace of condescension. "If what you're saying is true, you're not on just any prototype. You're on the Ghost of Antares, a War Coalition Black Ops vessel that disappeared during the Proxima conflict. It was supposedly destroyed, but clearly it wasn't," Max finished, reaching the upper deck. "Any other history lessons you'd like to share? Or can we focus on keeping me alive? The override will be different on a vessel like that. More complex. Military-grade security." She hesitated. "I'm not sure I can talk you through it remotely." Max stopped at a sealed doorway, which his scanner identified as the entrance to the bridge. "Then, what do you suggest?" "I'm coming aboard." "What? No, this thing's a death trap." "And you're trapped in it," Alara countered. "I have experience with War Coalition security systems. I can help." Before Max could argue further, the ship gave another violent lurch, and warning lights began flashing throughout the corridor. Whatever automated sequence had been triggered was accelerating. "Fine," he conceded. "But how do you plan to get in when I can't get out?" "There's an emergency access port on the starboard side, designed for boarding parties. Military vessels always have one. It bypasses the main security protocols." "And you know this because before I was reduced to scavenging parts in this celestial junkyard, I designed countermeasures against War Coalition vessels." Her voice hardened. "Now, are you going to keep questioning my expertise? Or are you going to let me save your stubborn human hide?" Despite everything, Max felt a smile tug at his lips. "When you put it that way, I'm all ears. Tell me where to meet you." As Max made his way toward the starboard emergency access, guided by Alara's instructions, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled into something far larger than a simple salvage operation. The Ghost of Antares was legendary in certain circles, a vessel capable of appearing and disappearing at will, responsible for strikes so precise and devastating that some claimed they couldn't have been the work of conventional forces. And now he was trapped inside it, waiting for help from an engineer who had ridiculed him hours earlier. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. He reached the access port, just as his retinal display updated. 1 hour and 45 minutes until his deadline expired. At this point, making the deadline seemed like the least of his worries. "I'm at the port," he reported. "Now what?" "Stand back," Alara replied. "Emergency boarding procedures aren't subtle." Max retreated several meters. Moments later, the access port exploded inward in a controlled detonation, and the slender form of the Rielian engineer jetted through the opening, environmental suit gleaming in the emergency lighting. She landed gracefully, despite the ship's continued trembling, all 4 arms bracing against various handholds. Her faceplate retracted, revealing an expression that mixed concern, excitement, and something Max couldn't quite identify. "Took you long enough," he said, falling back on humor to mask his relief. Alara's large, compound eyes narrowed slightly. "I had to evade space security patrols. Apparently, a supposedly derelict vessel, suddenly powering up its weapons systems, attracts attention. Who knew? Space security is here already?" And getting increasingly agitated about the situation, Alara pulled a sleek device from her utility belt and began scanning their surroundings. "We have maybe 30 minutes before they decide this ship is too dangerous to leave intact and blow it to atoms. With us inside." Max swallowed hard. "Then we'd better move fast. Bridge is this way." As they navigated through the vessel's dimly lit corridors, Max noticed that Alara seemed unusually familiar with the layout. She anticipated junctions before they appeared and knew which sealed doors could be bypassed and which needed to be forced. "For someone who was mocking my salvage attempt earlier, you seem remarkably invested in this ship now," he observed as they climbed a service shaft to the command deck. Alara's movements paused, almost imperceptibly before continuing. "Professional curiosity. The ghost of Antares is the stuff of engineering legend. A chance to examine it firsthand. Well, that's worth enduring your company. And here I thought you were just concerned for my welfare. A human with delusions of grandeur. How novel." But there was less bite in her sarcasm now, almost as if it were reflexive rather than genuine. They reached the bridge, a surprisingly compact space dominated by control stations, clearly designed for human operators. Unlike the rest of the ship, which bore the scars of battle and neglect, the bridge appeared almost pristine, as if sealed away and preserved for decades. Alara moved immediately to the central command console, her 4 hands working in perfect coordination across the interface. "The auto-defense sequence is being driven by the primary AI core. It's interpreting your salvage attempts as an attack. Can you shut it down?" "Not directly, but I might be able to convince it that we're friendly." She glanced up at him. "I need your help. Those secondary controls, the weapons management system. You need to access it and manually disengage the targeting protocols." Max hesitated. "You want me to handle weapons control? The same systems you Rielians insist humans are too primitive to understand?" Alara's large eyes blinked in what might have been embarrassment. "Your manual dexterity is better suited to the physical override switches. And..." She seemed to struggle with the admission. "Your work on the access panel earlier was not entirely incompetent." Coming from a Rielian engineer, it was practically a glowing endorsement. Max moved to the indicated station. "What exactly am I doing here?" "See those 3 red switches beneath the protective cover? They need to be disengaged in sequence, with precise timing between each one. Too fast or too slow, and the system locks down completely." Max studied the controls. "And the correct timing would be..." "I don't know." "What do you mean, you don't know?" Alara's hands never stopped moving across her console. "It would be specific to this vessel, calibrated to its captain's reflexes. A security measure." "Great," Max muttered. "So I'm guessing blindly?" "Not blindly. The sequence would follow standard War Coalition protocols. 3-second intervals would be most likely, based on human reaction time studies. Max positioned his hands over the switches. Ready when you are. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Max flipped the first switch, counted to 3 in his head. Flipped the second, counted again, then flipped the third. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, all at once, the lights on the bridge shifted from red to blue, and the violent trembling of the ship subsided to a gentle vibration. It worked! Max couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. Of course it worked, Alara replied, but he could hear relief in her tone. The defense system is on standby now, but we're not out of danger yet. The main power core is still active, and space security will be monitoring energy signatures. So we need to shut it down completely. Precisely. And that requires access to the engineering deck. Alara disconnected from the console, which, unfortunately, is 4 decks down and likely sealed tighter than a Jovian pressure chamber. Max's retinal display updated. 1 hour and 15 minutes remaining until deadline. Then we'd better get moving. I have a delivery to make. Alara stared at him. We're trapped on a legendary ghost ship, surrounded by space security, with less than half an hour before they decide to atomize us. And you're worried about your salvage deadline? A deal's a deal, Max said with a shrug. Besides, if we don't shut this thing down properly, neither of us will be collecting any payment. Humans, Alara muttered, but followed him toward the bridge exit, always fixating on the irrelevant details. The journey to the engineering deck proved more challenging than either of them had anticipated. Multiple security bulkheads had sealed automatically, requiring creative solutions to bypass. In some cases, Alara's technical knowledge provided the answer. In others, Max's practical experience with jury-rigged repairs saved the day. By the time they reached the final obstacle, a massive pressure door protecting the main engineering section, they had developed an unexpected rhythm to their cooperation. No longer adversaries. They functioned as a team, each contributing their unique skills without the need for lengthy explanations. This is it, Alara said, studying the formidable barrier before them. The primary core will be just beyond this door. Max examined the locking mechanism. No way to hack this one. It's completely mechanical, designed to function even if all power systems fail. A precaution against exactly the kind of tampering we're attempting. Alara's expression grew thoughtful. There might be another way, though. These vessels sometimes had maintenance conduits running parallel to the main compartments. Tight fits, meant for repair drones. But a human might be able to squeeze through, Max finished, while a Rielian would find it rather uncomfortable with 4 arms, she acknowledged. The access point should be near the environmental control panel. There, she pointed to a small hatch, almost hidden in the wall's contours. Max approached it, assessing the dimensions doubtfully. That's going to be a very tight fit. Are you volunteering a better solution? He sighed. No, but if I get stuck in there, I'm never going to hear the end of it from you, am I? Probably not, Alara admitted, the edges of her mouth curving in what might have been a smile. But at least you'd die knowing you'd provided me with an amusing anecdote to share at engineer gatherings. Your compassion is overwhelming. Max began removing the bulkier components of his environmental suit, stripping down to the form-fitting undersuit. Even so, the maintenance conduit would be a squeeze. Alara helped him open the access hatch, revealing a narrow tunnel that disappeared into darkness. Once you're inside the engineering section, you'll need to locate the primary coolant controls. Shut those down first. Then the reaction chamber. That should... A violent tremor rocked the ship, stronger than any before. Both of them grabbed for handholds as the lights flickered ominously. What was that? Max demanded once the shaking subsided. Alara's expression had gone grim. That, I believe, was space security losing patience. They're probably using low-yield charges to test the hull integrity. Testing it for what? for how much firepower they'll need to destroy the ship without damaging the surrounding salvage yard. She met his gaze directly. "We're out of time. Max. Go. Now." Without further argument, Max squeezed into the maintenance conduit, inching forward on his elbows in the claustrophobic space. Behind him, he heard Alara's voice over the comm. "I'll try to buy us some more time. Just focus on shutting down that core." The conduit twisted and turned, following the ship's internal structure. In places, it narrowed so severely that Max had to exhale completely to force his way through. His shoulders scraped against metal, and more than once, he feared he'd become hopelessly wedged. But stubbornness had always been his defining trait, according to his former crewmates. That, and an inconvenient tendency to keep his word, even when breaking it, would have been more profitable. After what felt like an eternity of claustrophobic crawling, the conduit widened slightly, then opened into a small maintenance hub. Beyond it, through a translucent panel, Max could see the engineering section, a vast chamber dominated by the pulsing blue light of the ship's power core. He removed the panel carefully and slipped into the room, immediately overwhelmed by the scale of the technology surrounding him. This was no ordinary reactor. The core, suspended in the center of the chamber, resembled a miniature star, contained within fields of energy that shifted and rippled like living things. "I'm in," he reported over the comm. "But this isn't standard War Coalition tech. I've never seen anything like it." Static answered him. The thick walls of the engineering section must have been blocking communications. Max was on his own. He approached the nearest control station, hoping to find some indication of how to safely power down the extraordinary system before him. The interface was human-designed, but filled with unfamiliar symbols and readouts. Nothing about this matched the schematics he'd studied for other military vessels. Another tremor shook the ship, more violent than before. The space security forces were getting serious now. Max had minutes, perhaps only seconds, before they deployed enough firepower to ensure the ghost of Antares would never rise again. Trusting his instincts, Max began systematically shutting down auxiliary systems first, reducing power demand on the core. As each system went offline, the pulsing light at the center of the room dimmed slightly. It was working, slowly, but working. He had just reached what appeared to be the primary coolant controls when a new alarm sounded, different from the others, more urgent. Red warning symbols flashed across the interface. Without understanding the specific language, Max recognized a countdown when he saw one. Something had triggered the ship's self-destruct sequence. "No, no, no," he muttered, fingers flying across the controls in an attempt to abort the process. But each command was rejected, the system demanding authorization codes he didn't possess. The countdown continued relentlessly, 2 minutes, and decreasing. In that moment, Max made a decision that contradicted every salvager's instinct he'd developed over 15 years. Instead of trying to shut the system down, he began routing power back into specific subsystems: communications, navigation, and life support. If he couldn't stop the self-destruct, maybe he could at least record what he'd found, create a log of the ship's secrets before they were lost forever. As the auxiliary systems came back online, a holographic display materialized above the central console. Ship schematics, mission logs, crew manifests, a treasure trove of classified information suddenly accessible as the ghost of Antares prepared for its final moments. Max worked frantically, downloading as much data as possible to his personal device. The countdown had reached 1 minute when the engineering section door slid open, revealing Alara, her environmental suit damaged and one arm hanging limply at her side. "What are you doing?" she demanded, taking in the reactivated systems and the flashing countdown. "You're supposed to be shutting it down." "Too late for that," Max replied, not pausing in his work. "Self-destruct's been triggered, but I'm saving what I can." Alara moved to his side, her 3 functioning arms immediately joining his efforts. Space security breached the outer hull. They're aboard and heading this way. How long? 2 minutes, maybe less. Max glanced at the countdown. 45 seconds. Then they're in for a surprise. Working together, they managed to transfer an impressive amount of data before the countdown reached 15 seconds. At that point, Alara grabbed Max's arm. "Time to go," she said urgently. "There's an escape pod adjacent to this section. It's our only chance." Max hesitated, staring at the still transferring data. So many secrets. So much potential value slipping away. "Max!" Alara's grip tightened. "The pod!" Snapping out of his momentary trance, Max nodded and followed her through a side exit he hadn't noticed before. True to her word, a small escape pod waited there, its hatch already open. They tumbled inside just as the countdown reached 5 seconds. Alara slammed her palm against the launch control, and the pod rocketed away from the doomed vessel with a bone-jarring acceleration that pinned them both against the bulkhead. Through the small viewport, Max watched as the ghost of Antares erupted in a silent, blinding flash. The explosion was surprisingly contained, a testament to the advanced technology that had gone into the vessel's design. Rather than spreading outward, the energy seemed to collapse inward, as if the ship were devouring itself. When the light faded, nothing remained but a cloud of rapidly dispersing particles where the legendary vessel had once been. "That," Alara said quietly, "was a zero-point implosion, designed to leave no trace, no salvageable wreckage, no evidence." Max checked his personal device, relieved to find the downloaded data intact. "Not quite no evidence," he replied. Their escape pod drifted through the debris field, its emergency beacon automatically activating. Within minutes, they were surrounded by space security vessels, tractor beams locking onto the small craft to bring it in for boarding. "What happens now?" Max asked, as they waited for the inevitable. Alara's large eyes studied him with an unreadable expression. "That depends on what you intend to do with that data." Before Max could respond, the pod's hatch was forced open, and they found themselves staring down the barrels of multiple weapons held by grim-faced security officers in full tactical gear. "By authority of the Interstellar Treaty of Proxima, you are detained pending investigation into the destruction of salvage yard property and interference with a restricted military asset," announced the lead officer, a human woman with captain's insignia. "Step out slowly with your hands visible." Max and Alara complied, emerging into the larger vessel's docking bay. They were immediately separated, security personnel escorting Alara in one direction, while Max was led to what appeared to be an interrogation room. He sat alone for nearly an hour, his personal device confiscated, wondering if he'd finally stumbled into a situation his wits couldn't navigate him out of. His retinal display, at least. They hadn't taken 30 minutes past his salvage deadline. Whatever deal he'd hoped to make was now void. When the door finally opened, it wasn't the security captain who entered, but a tall, distinguished-looking human man in an immaculate War Coalition uniform, adorned with the insignia of high rank. His silver hair was cropped short in military fashion, and his posture spoke of decades of command. "Mr. Holloway," he said, his voice exactly matching the one that had spoken over the comm earlier, the mysterious client's representative. "You've had quite the adventure today." Max straightened in his chair. "Seems that way. And you are?" "Captain Nexus, War Coalition Special Fleet." The man sat across from Max, his movements precise and controlled. "Though I suspect you already deduced the Coalition's interest in the vessel you were salvaging." "The Ghost of Antares," Max said, watching for a reaction. "Not exactly standard salvage yard fare." "Indeed not. A prototype that was supposed to have been destroyed during the Proxima conflict. Instead, it seems it was abandoned, its stealth systems ensuring it remained undetected for decades." Nexus leaned forward slightly. Until you found it. Pure luck, Max admitted. Or bad luck, depending on how this conversation ends. The captain's mouth curved in a slight smile. That remains to be determined. I'm curious. Mr. Holloway, what exactly did you hope to gain by salvaging a top-secret military vessel? Initially, just components to sell. When I realized what it was, Max shrugged. Information has value too. And to whom were you planning to sell this valuable information? Hadn't decided yet. Max met the captain's gaze steadily. Was weighing my options when your ship decided to throw a tantrum and blow itself up. Nexus nodded, as if this confirmed something he already knew. The self-destruct sequence was actually triggered by Space Security's attempted breach. A final safeguard. He paused. However, before that happened, you managed to download a significant amount of data from the ship's systems. Data that rightfully belongs to the War Coalition. Data that wouldn't exist at all if I hadn't recovered it, Max countered. A fair point. Nexus tapped a control on the table between them, and a holographic display appeared, showing the contents of Max's personal device. You've managed to salvage schematics for the stealth system, weapon specifications, and partial mission logs. Impressive, given the time constraints. Max said nothing, waiting to see where this was leading. The War Coalition values initiative, Mr. Holloway, and resourcefulness. Both qualities you've demonstrated today. The captain deactivated the display. I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Join my fleet. We have need of individuals with your particular talents. People who can see value where others see only wreckage. People willing to risk everything for what they believe is right. Of all the outcomes Max had imagined for this day, a job offer from the War Coalition hadn't been among them. What exactly would this position entail? Officially, you'd be classified as a salvage specialist, attached to my command. Unofficially. Nexus smiled again, more genuinely this time. You'd be part of an elite team tasked with recovering lost Coalition assets throughout the frontier, similar to what you attempted today, but with proper authorization and equipment. And the pay? Substantial, plus bonuses for particularly valuable recoveries. Max considered the offer. It would mean stability, legitimacy, an end to scraping by on the margins of settled space. But it would also mean answering to others, following orders, becoming part of a hierarchy he'd avoided for most of his adult life. What about Alara? He asked. The Rielian engineer. What happens to her? Nexus raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the question. Engineer Cathar has her own arrangement with Coalition intelligence. She's been a valuable asset for some time, though her cover as a salvage yard worker may be compromised after today's events. So that explained Alara's familiarity with the ship and her sudden appearance when things went wrong. She had been watching him all along, reporting to her Coalition handlers. I want her on my team, Max said, surprising himself with the firmness of his tone. If I accept your offer. The captain studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That can be arranged, assuming she agrees. Coalition vessels are typically crewed by mixed species teams anyway. Her technical expertise would complement your practical skills. Then we have a deal. Max extended his hand. Provided I get to keep a copy of the data I salvaged. For personal reference. Nexus laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. You certainly don't lack audacity, Mr. Holloway. I can allow you access to the non-classified portions under supervised conditions. Will that suffice? It wasn't everything, but it was more than Max had expected. It'll do. They shook hands, sealing the agreement. As Nexus rose to leave, he paused at the door. Report to Docking Bay 3 at 0800 tomorrow. We'll have a proper uniform waiting. Uniform? Max grimaced. Is that really necessary? Coalition regulations. I'm afraid. But I think you'll find our engineering jumpsuits considerably more comfortable and cleaner than your current attire. With that parting shot, The captain left, the door sliding shut behind him. Left alone again, Max leaned back in his chair, trying to process the rapid turn of events. From salvager to coalition specialist in the span of a day. His former associates would never believe it. The door opened again a short time later, admitting Alara. Her injured arm had been treated and now rested in a regenerative sling. She regarded him with a mixture of amusement and respect. "So," she said, settling into the chair Nexus had vacated. "I hear we're to be colleagues." "Seems that way." Max studied her, seeing her in a new light, now that he knew she wasn't just a condescending Raelian engineer. "How long have you been working for the Coalition?" 3 standard years. After the Raelian Engineering Guild revoked my credentials for unconventional methodologies. Her multiple eyes blinked in what he now recognized as her version of a shrug. "I proposed integrating human manual techniques with Raelian quantum diagnostics. The Guild was unreceptive." "Their loss," Max said simply. "Indeed." Alara tilted her head slightly. "Though I admit, I didn't expect you to request my assignment to your team. After my behavior in the salvage yard." "You saved my life on that ship," Max pointed out. "Besides, 4 arms are better than 2 when it comes to complex repairs." "A practical assessment. How very human of you." But there was no malice in her tone, only a gentle teasing. "Captain Nexus is a good commander, demanding but fair. His vessels are known for their technological innovation." "And their dangerous missions, I'd imagine." "The most interesting kind." Alara rose gracefully. "I should go. There are debriefings to complete before our new assignment begins. But I wanted to say—" She hesitated, seemingly uncomfortable. "Your work today was impressive. For a human." Max couldn't help but smile. "And your assistance was adequate. For a Raelian." Their eyes met in mutual understanding, and for a brief moment, the traditional barriers between their species seemed to dissolve. Then Alara nodded briskly and departed, leaving Max to contemplate his new future. The following morning, Max stood in Docking Bay 3, wearing the dark blue jumpsuit of a Coalition salvage specialist. It felt strange after years in his patched and stained personal gear. But he had to admit the material was comfortable, and the utility pockets well-designed. Alara arrived shortly after, similarly attired but with modifications to accommodate her forearms. She nodded approvingly at his appearance. "Almost respectable," she commented. "Though I notice you've already managed to get engine lubricant on the sleeve." Max glanced down at the small stain and grinned. "Just marking it as mine. Wouldn't want to lose my reputation entirely." Before she could reply, a side door opened, and Captain Nexus entered, accompanied by several other officers. The captain's gaze swept over them both, and he nodded in satisfaction. "Engineer Cathar, Specialist Holloway." He greeted them formally. "Welcome to the Coalition Special Recovery Fleet. Your first assignment awaits." He gestured toward the viewport, where a sleek vessel was just moving into docking position. Unlike the bulky, utilitarian design of standard Coalition ships, this one had the predatory lines of a fast attack craft, with additional modules that Max recognized as specialized recovery equipment. "The CSS Venturi," Nexus announced. "Recently refitted with some of the technology you recovered from the Ghost of Antares. She's been without a dedicated salvage team for 3 months. Until now." Max and Alara exchanged glances, both clearly impressed by the vessel that would be their new home. "When do we leave?" Max asked. "As soon as you're aboard," the captain replied. "There's a derelict hegemony research station in the Tau Ceti system that suddenly started broadcasting again after 20 years of silence. I want to know what's on it before anyone else gets there." "Sounds dangerous," Alara observed. "Undoubtedly," Nexus agreed. "But if anyone can uncover its secrets and return with them intact, I believe it's the 2 of you." He extended his hand, first to Max, then to Alara. "Good hunting." As they boarded the Venturi, Max noticed a group of Rielian technicians watching from an observation platform above the bay. Among them was the engineer who had mocked his efforts at the salvage yard, his 4 eyes widening in disbelief as he recognized Max in Coalition uniform. Max couldn't resist a small wave in their direction before following Alara into the ship. Let them wonder. Let them talk about the human mechanic who had discovered one of the greatest military secrets of the past century, and lived to tell the tale. The airlock sealed behind them with a reassuring hiss, and the ship's internal gravity engaged, giving a subtle sensation of weight where there had been none moments before. "Ready for this?" Alara asked, as they made their way toward the bridge. Max thought about the path that had led him here, from scrounging parts in a salvage yard to standing aboard one of the most advanced vessels in the Coalition fleet. All because he had refused to accept what others told him about his limitations. "I was born ready," he replied with a confidence that surprised even himself. "The question is the universe ready for us?" Alara's multiple eyes crinkled in what he now recognized as her species' version of a smile. "Absolutely not," she said, "which is precisely what makes it interesting." As the Venturi detached from the station and accelerated toward the jump point, Max felt a sense of anticipation, unlike anything he'd experienced in years. Whatever waited for them at that abandoned research station, whatever challenges lay beyond, he would face them with the same determination that had carried him through 15 years of solo salvage work. Only this time, he wouldn't be facing them alone. And as for the Rielians who had mocked him, the salvage yard managers who had dismissed him, and all the others who had underestimated what a human mechanic could accomplish with nothing but determination and a good set of tools, they would just have to get used to the sight of Max Holloway, Coalition salvage specialist, returning from the frontier with treasures they could only dream of finding. And maybe, just maybe, they would think twice before mocking the next human they saw, working alone on a derelict ship in the vastness of space. Because you never knew what secrets that ship might hold, or whose ship it might turn out to be.